Hey, what's up, 180 family? I'm Mark Schroer, and welcome to the 180 Drums podcast. This is where we speak with some of the world's best drummers, and we talk about everything from practice routine, gear, networking, and what it takes to be a world-class drummer. On the podcast today, we have the incredible, the amazing Nate Robinson. Nate is the touring live drummer for Lecrae. He's also one of our instructors here at 180 Drums. He's got some crazy lessons that you should definitely go check out. On the podcast today, Nate is going to talk about the importance of being able to identify your weaknesses. He's also going to list the things that you should do for every audition that you take. I found this podcast to be very inspiring, and I hope you do too. With no further ado, please welcome Nate Robinson and Jake Nicole.
Guys, welcome to the 180 Drums podcast. Now today we've got Nate Robinson, and Nate is the touring drummer with Lecrae, but he's also just an all-around wicked player, studio cat. Dude, it is so good to have you on the show, man.
Man, my pleasure, as always.
Now, one thing that I didn't include in that intro that should have been there, that I'm sure Mark Schroer, who does beautiful intros on these podcasts, is the fact that, dude, you were one of our guests and one of our instructors at 180, man.
Yeah, man, that was a really good experience, man. I'm hoping I can do it again. I hate that I missed you guys last time I was in town.
Yeah, we missed you too. We actually had a lot of conversation about having you back in, so we will. This will not be the last. We will line that up again for sure. And the other thing I was thinking, man, too, is like just to compliment you right away for everyone listening is that there might be some guys that are unfamiliar with, say, Lecrae or your gig, but I think you as a drummer, the reason you guys, everybody in the 180 family, needs to go and check out Nate's playing is that the dude is like a human metronome, a human drum machine, but it has feel. And, dude, you are so technically proficient, man. So kind of tell us how you got started, because I've had a lot of guests on the show, and there's a lot of drummers that can't quite break things down the way that you do. So what's your background, man? How did you get started playing?
Well, I mean, like a bunch of dudes, I just started in church. You know, it was I had the desire to beat on things. I'm not even sure where that came from because like nobody in my family is really musically inclined. Like my mom is definitely not. My dad, he's what you would call like a horn holder. So he was in the marching band, but he was in the marching band because he couldn't play football or other stuff. So he was like, I guess I'll be in the band, but he wasn't a player.
Right.
So I'm not even sure where the desire came from initially, but I wanted to play, and the place where I saw it, and it was, most readily available to me was at church. And so I just kind of started picking up things at church and begging to play whenever I could, which, you got older guys who are more experienced. So they're not really trying to let the young dude hop on the drums. So I would I would be there. I would beg to play. Finally, somebody would let me play. And then from there, it was like, I fell in love with it. So I wanted to join the band like at school, and so I started kind of messing around with, I guess first it was really violin.
Oh, cool, man.
Like in elementary school, because that was the only track they had was for music, was violin and like the recorder. So
no way. Oh man, the recorder's the worst.
Right. So
that's kind of though.
That's where I started, and then from there it was like marching band and concert band and jazz band. Which is where I definitely picked up a lot of my my desire to really be a technical player. A lot of that came from just having good teachers and having people kind of break down the art of like being a musician or being an instrumentalist and helping you to learn the little things that make you better. And so, like, I think that's just kind of a part of how I'm built anyway. Like, even when I did a lot of basketball and, like, a lot of sports when I was young. And I was the same way with sports. Like, I was really into, like, mechanics and the technical side of things. That's probably what I get from my dad because he's an engineer. So I just kind of I try to engineer music, you know.
Man, this is actually really cool because my father is also an engineer. He's an electric engineer, and my family both, neither of them have any musical background as well. So it's cool to hear we kind of have a bit of a similar upbringing, and I think that does affect the way you approach music when it's you almost discovering it all your own and growing up in the church, which is again where I learned to. I was first inspired to play, and partly where I learned. So crazy, man. That's really cool.
And my dad's an electrical engineer too. Like,
Oh, there you go. What does your mom do?
my mom is like she works in the hospital system in Houston.
Shut up. My
Yeah,
mom's in school to be an osteopath.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
funny, man. There's a pattern there. That's cool.
yeah.
So okay, so you're growing up. You're playing violin in the recorder in school. You were debating touring full time as a recorder, but as a recorder player. But when did the drums become the focus, man?
So, like I said, all along, it was always the drums. Like from the time I was like 2, I was like banging on stuff. I had a little drum kit at home, and I think the time that it became like my complete focus, I would say it was around the ninth grade. You know,
Okay.
between 2 years old and the ninth grade, that's when I was like, let me try this little band stuff at school. But I also love baseball, so I was like playing baseball half the year and then playing basketball half the year. And I thought for a while like I was gonna be an athlete because I was pretty good, and I was getting a little bit of attention from like high school coaches and AAU coaches. I thought I was gonna be an athlete.
Oh wow, man.
And
That's funny because there is a baller named Nate Robinson, isn't there?
yeah, bro. That's so funny because like I get that all the time when I'm in the airport or whatever. Like Nate Robinson, I'm like, nah, like I'm not. I'm the one with no money.
Come on, man. You're gonna have to start saying, "Yeah, you're that guy," but you're the drummer they should know about.
I might borrow that one. That's a good one.
There you go. So, dude, grade 9, you're playing. Who are some of the guys that are at that time in your life having the biggest inspiration on your playing?
Um, one of the closest at that time was Chris, Dave, and it's because we grew up like in the same city. We grew up like minutes apart. We're in the same age group. He's a little bit older. He's probably 4 or 5 years older than I am, and so he was definitely like setting the path for all the young Houston dudes at that time. So that was a big one, and it wasn't so much like the way he kind of inspires people now, like as far as playing. For me back then, like we were young, so for me it was more so like, wow, I see he's like really taking this seriously. I see he's really studying. He's like taking a certain approach. So that's really what got my attention from him. And then outside of that, man, it was at that time I really wasn't well schooled. So I was getting a lot of my education from watching Chris, and I would see who he was listening to. So I started kind of listening to some guys, but for the most part, my education or my influences were right close by back then. So it was like whoever the guy was playing at church, or whoever the guy was playing at a different church, or whoever the guy. There's a guy named Ernest Walker who's, he's a local guy in Houston. He's a great guy and a really smart businessman, and he definitely was one of my mentors. But you wouldn't know him as a drummer, But he definitely inspired my playing because he was the guy that was close by. And when I was 16, 17 years old, he would allow me to like basically just be his backline tech, and I would go to clubs, set up and break down for him, and sit there and watch him play, and just soak up a lot, So that's my early influences were all just kind of close by. I wasn't schooled at all during my early years.
Man, that is so cool to hear because, my perspective of you, and I think you'll probably get into this, is that there's some marching influence as well. Because like you definitely have there are some guys that grow up in the church and they have a sound, and it's a very gospel sound, and it's in some ways often a little bit unrefined. And what really sets you apart as a drummer is that you have that sensibility, that gospel sensibility, but you also have this very non-rigid approach that's very structured and very systematic to not only the way you learn and teach, but even how technically proficient you are with your playing, because you're playing along to a lot of tracks all the time, right?
Yeah.
So where does that come into play, man? Did you march at all?
Yeah, I did. I did all 4 years in high school. I did all 4 years in college. Well, really 3.5. I got my last year of college. I started getting the bug, and I was ready to start like being a working musician. So I kind of walked out on all my friends. They hate me for it. But
well,
yeah,
it's done you well so far, man.
But yeah, some of that approach definitely does come from marching band and like playing in sections of people like that, like being a part of a 30-man unit of drummers and having to always think about parts and always having to make sure that parts are locking together and that the parts are locking with what the band is playing and that, dynamics are correct. Like, so just really being like overboard on the technical issues. A lot of that did definitely come from that. And then another part of it, man, is in a weird way, I've never been like, even though I grew up in church and I grew up around gospel music, I've never been a fan of gospel music.
Very interesting, dude. Okay.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of gospel music. And even to this day, like, I'm just not a fan. Me and my mom used to get into it because, like every good parent, like she wanted me to be involved in church. And the most natural way for me to be involved in church was to play. But as I got like around those basketball years, like around 11 to 12, that's when I really started like understanding that I didn't really like this style of music. So I would argue with her all the time, like, nah, I don't want to play. I'd rather play basketball. So we get into it because she's like, well, you got to do something at church. What are you going to do? And the natural thing was drums, but I really didn't want to do it. So as I started to really get into my playing, like around 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, when I really started digging in, I definitely started like trying to identify who I was as a player. And I knew right away that who I was definitely not the gospel chops dude. You know what I mean? Cool. As much as I respect it, like that's some killer playing, but it's just not. But it's not my style. It doesn't fit my personality. Like it's just kind of not who I am. So that's another place where it came from. It's just always trying to really think about and define who I am as a player. And so I knew right away that that's not it. So I started trying to create something that's comfortable and authentic to who I am.
Man, that provides so much more insight into your style and your sound, man. I think that really helps even the listeners. So like what then would be some of the artists that were probably the most heavily inspiring you? So you're not listening to the gospel music. What are you gravitating to at that time?
Man, funny story. So this is back when like VHS was still a thing, right?
Dude, you're so old, man.
I know, right? So like I used to go to Blockbuster, which some people probably won't even know what Blockbuster is, but
do you mean Netflix? What do you mean Blockbuster?
Yeah, right. This is Netflix 1.0.
Do you know that backstory, by the way, that Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix early on and invest a bunch of money in that? Do you know the story?
No. Wow.
Blockbuster had the opportunity to, and they said, that's silly, that'll never work. And they ended up, they debated it for a while and they turned it down. And isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Little business story for all y'all. Don't forget that everything is always progressing forward.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. And look for the progression and jump on the train.
Dude, this is the story of you as a drummer too, man. So cool. The story of progression. I think we just got our title.
Man, that is crazy, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, craziness. So like one thing I used to do all the time was go to this prehistoric place called Blockbuster and go to the music section and just like rent different concert videos. So like I would watch uh, Anita Baker, right, for instance, which is like definitely not the age group or the like the style of music that I would have or should have been listening to, but it was there, so I would just get it. And
Cool.
come to find out that it was Ricky Lawson playing the drums on that video, right? So I learned a lot from just watching this guy, Ricky Lawson, who I had no idea who he was until years later. And then I would get like they had Rush. So like I would get the Rush video and watch Neil Peart. Didn't know who he was at the time, but I would just get it and watch it. And
Wow.
I would rent these videos like over and over, like every week. You know what I mean? And just go home and watch the stuff. And that's how I started to kind of get a music history education and started to like understand who players were. And you know, that's where I started to become influenced by different drummers. It started at Blockbuster. And then like the first album that I really bought and like dug into was the Mo Better Blues soundtrack, which is amazing if you love jazz. Like that's still a crazy record. But it's Jeff Tain Watts playing drums, and the whole soundtrack was done by Terrence Blanchard and Wynton Marsalis is not Wynton, Branford is playing like the saxes. It's an amazing record. So that was like the first record that I bought with the intent of learning music. It was like a high level jazz record. And then from there it was like I started going down that rabbit trail. So I started buying more Terrence Blanchard stuff and more Wynton and Branford stuff. And that's when I started discovering like Brian Blade and started discovering Herlin Riley and, you know, more of Tain. So like that, I went down the jazz road first, and then from there, like I just kept following the rabbit trail. You know what I mean?
Oh man, that is so cool. It's funny how it was a similar story with me going into like the local library and just taking out CDs, and I had no idea who they were. And you look back and you're like, man, that's hilarious. I remember listening to like Snake Oil by Tony Williams when I was like, you know, super young, man. Just accidentally stumbling on stuff that takes you down that path, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really cool background, man. Now.
Yeah. Oh wait, I got another quick cool story too.
Yeah.
I have a buddy in Houston named Derek James. He's my accountant, but he's also like he's an insane jazz drummer. And
Get out of here.
When he left and went to college, him and Chris Dave and some other guys from Houston all went to the same school. They went to Howard in DC. And then like he came back, I think it was after his freshman year. He came back to and he brought his kit over to my house. And we were gonna sit down and do some practicing. And so when he came, we started trying to work on like just some swing stuff. And mind you, I'm in the ninth grade. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry, man.
Oh, no problem at all.
Yeah.
So for everybody listening, for you guys, like I think the biggest thing to take away from this is that you gotta not just like find a drummer that inspires you, but then take that drummer and follow the trail. See where it leads you. Don't be afraid to keep checking out new acts because you come across someone. So like what I'm seeing with Nate right away is this sense of you discover an artist, you dig into it, it leads you to another artist. You find out, you know, maybe the bass player playing with so and so is also playing with this act. So you just kind of keep checking out that circle of musicians, and before you know it, you've built up a pretty solid foundation on which you can kind of learn from. Does that sound about right, man?
Yeah, man. I call it the rabbit trail.
Dude, the rabbit trail.
Just follow it. But yeah, my guy Derek, man, it was amazing. I was trying to learn the swing. I was doing it all wrong. And he gave me a cassette tape of Coltrane's Love Supreme. And he was like, man, study this. And so like that's what sent me down the jazz path. And then it was everything else that followed after that. But it started with the cassette tape. And I just chased it. Followed the rabbit trail.
Nate, tell us, man, what's a cassette tape?
I know, right?
I'm just messing with you, man.
VHS, cassette tape.
Oh, man. It's another time, dude. Remember when those were in cars? Oh, wait, they're still in tons of cars.
Barely.
Cassette tapes. Yeah, it's true. Barely anymore. Man, that's awesome, dude. So, okay, present day, you're playing with Lecrae, who's had insane success, man. How did that all come to happen? And was there any big gigs prior to that?
Yeah. To answer your second part first, yeah, I started like working quote unquote as like a professional and being on the road when I was like 19, and that was with Wayman Tisdale, who's he's passed away now, but he's a former NBA player, and then he turned bass player. So he had
man.
the whole smooth jazz thing going, right? So I did that when I was 20, 21, 22. And then from there, I was I did a couple of mainstream like hip hop and R&B acts like Khalees and Tank and Angie Stone and Jermaine Dupri, some of his other artists that never really hit the market. But yeah, like I've done a good amount of things leading up to when the situation happened with Lecrae, and and then the way that came about was actually we have a mutual friend, and when they were looking for somebody, this guy was like, "Hey man, you should just check out Nate," and so they rang me up, and when they first called, I was like, I don't know, like I'm not a fan of like the Christian rap thing, especially at that point in time.
No kidding, yeah.
The quality wasn't great. I hadn't experienced any good quality, so I was like, I don't know. But I listened to it. Well, I listened and heard them out, and got a chance to meet some of the dudes. And I was like, man, they seem like they're really good people. So I should give it a try. If for nothing else, like it's just good relationships that I could potentially build. And so, yeah, after that, man, it was like there was no audition, there was no real process. It just kind of was a good fit, and it worked. And it's been almost 6 years now.
Man, that raises a really interesting point that I think everybody needs to not miss, and that's don't shoot yourself in the foot too early, right? Because had you gone in and been like, man, yeah, you know what, not for me, and had a bit of a self-righteous attitude, it would not have worked, right? So because you went in, you just wanted to meet the guys, you gave it an opportunity, it actually led to a massive gig. So that's really cool, man. That's a really good background, I think, for everyone to hook on to, is just to kind of take your time, take the opportunity to hear people out when it comes to gigs, and then who knows what'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, man, in that situation, and this definitely came over time and some experience. But what I learned is what your idea of success or what your idea of the right gig is might not actually be, what's the best for you or what's the best out there. And so you have to open yourself up to things and not just close the door on stuff because it doesn't fit your ideal situation. You know what I mean? Because like for me, I guarantee you, I would have never ever, like I told you, I wasn't a big fan of gospel music, and if you say Christian rap, that's in the same category for me. So my answer was just going to be no. I'm good. Thank you for the offer.
Right. Dude, was there a track that you heard by Lecrae at that time, or like anything, like a mix? Nothing. Wow. So when was the first time you heard it and went, okay, I like this?
When I got the music to study for rehearsals.
Wow, man. So you had to go down that road pretty humble for a while before you were like, oh man, this is actually going to be awesome.
Yeah. I was definitely like a bit on edge. I was like, am I going to hate this? Like my reasoning for deciding to do it really had nothing to do with music. It all had to do with like just relationships and looking for some personal growth in myself at that time, So it was like I could be around like some strong people and grow. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do this. But in my mind, I was like, man, I'm gonna tough this out because it has the potential to be terrible. You know what I mean?
Like that, man. Yeah.
But it ended up being great,
Man, you would not have known had you not gone down that path. So Man, another thing, just for everybody listening, because there's, you're a family man. I just want to call that out right away, dude. What's your situation at home with your home life right now?
Man, wife and 3 kids.
Three
And
kids. So guys, if you're hearing some noise, don't let it distract you. That's because this dude is making a living playing music and has a family. That's a rarity these days.
I
So
literally just had to step outside. Like,
I
so,
know, man. It's cool, dude. It's cool. I know that we talked in advance that's it's so hard to find the time. I mean, one of my closest friends and the business partner for me with 180, the co-founder, Steve Augustine, he is about to have his fourth kid. I don't even know if you knew that, Nate.
kidding.
They're like I want to say 2 to 3 months away
Oh,
from
wow.
having their fourth. So, man, there's so many times I'm over there. We're trying to have a business meeting or something, and it's just you learn to roll with the punches. It actually makes life more fun. So,
Yeah.
um, so this is really cool, man. So you get that gig. It ends up being awesome. Where did that gig take you that was surprising? What were some of the stages or the events or even just the TV shows that you guys were part of that kind of floored you?
Um, um,
Were you
I
more
think
anticipating it? Did you see it? Was it enough of a progression that it wasn't surprising?
I mean, definitely that does exist. Like I came in at the right time where it was still like kind of being built. So I got a chance to see a lot of the progression.
I see.
So it was like, okay, I see where this is going and it's cool. But I think it still is I kind of still surprises me that it it played out the way that it did, and like that, the plan that they put in place actually worked, and has been like the execution doesn't shock me because they're smart people and they run a great business, but the fact that some of the doors that swung open and the way some things were received by like areas that you would normally think might just kind of close that door, that was a little shocking to me. And that's when I'm like, man, this is definitely like, it's providence. It's supposed to happen.
Very cool, man. Yeah, like I remember the moment when Lecrae hit Billboard. That was big on the Fallon show. Just moments where you're starting to see this become far more than just like a Christian musician. And that's not to at all slam Christian musicians or like to put any slack on that. It's more so that there's usually a bit of a large separation between those two worlds, and you don't see it
Yeah.
cross over very frequently.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool to watch.
Yeah.
So what
So
were
like for instance, like with Fallon, I wasn't, because I saw the progression happening, it didn't blow me away that we were there. But what blew me away was the way that like even Jimmy Fallon personally like just received us. Like, you know what I mean? That's what kind of shocked me. Like, dang, like he's actually like he's into it. He's listening to the music, and he's talking about what songs are his favorite songs.
Wow, man,
I'm
that
like,
is
dang,
really cool.
like he actually, like, it wasn't just, okay, somebody is on the bill for the show today, let me just go through the motions. It was, and now you see he's been back like 2-3 times now. So he was on the other night too. So it's like now he's almost like a friend of the show. So that kind of stuff blows my mind. Like, wow, it's not just the doors open, but it's actually like, hey, come on in.
Wow, man, crazy. Well, dude, we're gonna have to definitely delve deeper into all this stuff, and I think we need an episode with you where we just kind of unravel more because you're involved and proactive in a lot of different ways, and you're kind of almost developing what I would call largely your own brand, and I think it'll turn into your own little organization that's going to be super profound and impactful. So that's something that I'd love to chat about more. I've got a couple kind of quicker questions for you. The answers don't have to be fast, but the questions are targeted. They're actually written down, contrary to most of the way we do our interviews, which is a hang.
Yeah.
So this question here actually comes from Cam and Sather, and he's a part of our 180 family. So for everybody listening, you're a part of the fam. And what happens is all of our subscribers get pushed into a group that we're still working on developing out and kind of piloting with a select group of our users. And it's a Facebook group, man. Nate's a part of it, so he engages and hangs out with the community when he's got the time or a question prompts him. And today we had Cameron asking, what's one thing that you tell yourself 5 years ago?
I think to continue like to practice and work as if like your life depended on it, like, you know, and,
staying hungry.
Yeah, and like not to get comfortable when you start to get more work. Like, and I don't even say get comfortable, because it's not even a comfortability thing. It's more like when you start to play and you're playing for a living, then like your practice time just kind of gets cut out because you're playing so consistently.
Right.
But yeah, I would definitely tell myself, like, okay, this is about to happen. You're gonna play almost every day, and you're gonna be very tired a lot of other times. So figure out how to continue to have a practice regimen, more than just like a warm-up regimen, but like how to continue to have a practice regimen to continue getting better.
Well, that's great, because kind of the next thing that Cameron asked, he asked a little bit of a two-part question, was what are some techniques to expand drumming concepts? And I think to take that question and simplify it a little bit is, how do you stay inspired, and what is it that drives you to keep working on stuff or creating more than just a practice routine, more than just a warm-up routine?
One of the things that is just a good life lesson that my dad taught me was always focus on your weaknesses. And so like that lesson came about because of like math. Like I sucked in math. So my dad would always like just encourage me to, since you suck in it, like spend time in it. And even though it's the exact opposite of what you want to do, but that's where you need to spend your time. So because of that, I kind of approach most things in life like that, and definitely my playing. All I ever see, all I ever hear are my weaknesses. And because of that, I always have something to work on. You know what I mean? And I won't say what my weaknesses are. I'm gonna keep that to myself.
Yeah, because you don't need anyone else to be worrying about it but you, man.
Right. But like that gives me a subject matter to always explore. So if X is the weak part of my plan, then I know to go and keep looking for X. So I'm looking for exercises to work on this, or studying people who I think do it really well and trying to study their mechanics and see, you know, what they're doing that I'm not doing properly that I could get better at. Or so that's what drives me to always have something to strive for, is I'm always analyzing my weaknesses.
Very cool, man. Yeah, like something that I definitely find too is it's a balance. I've heard Thomas Lang, who's a super proficient drummer, share the exact same advice, which is if you keep improving your weaknesses, eventually you'll find less and less of them to work on, right? And I think that that's totally true. I mean, one of my biggest weaknesses, I think, for a while was getting so caught up in wanting to technically understand things that like I was losing my ability to shut my mind off while playing and just play and not think. And also, it's funny because if you're always practicing, something I would do is always working on my weaknesses. I'd want to gravitate towards playing grooves that I wasn't super comfortable with, because I was always trying to push myself. And knowing the time and place to separate what you're working on from where you currently are strong as a drummer, and playing within your strengths and not exposing your weaknesses. So, you know, that's something that, just personally letting you guys in, everyone listening, that's something that I work through all the time is, you know, everybody, and trust me, man, I've sat there with you, Nate. I've watched you play. You're a drummer who has few weaknesses compared to some of our other guests, and they're open about that. And yet every guy we've had in, like, some of the best drummers in the world, peeps, every single guy has had a moment of doubt in the seat, and has had a moment of like, man, did that sound good? Like a little bit of self-conscious reflection on what they just played. So we're all dealing with that on some level, man. So that's great. Zach Smith said, so he was kind of asking a question about auditions. Like, now, how many auditions have you sat through, man?
I've done a fair share. I've definitely done my fair share of auditions.
Give me like 3 really solid points to go into every audition with.
Play the music.
Great.
I gotta put that one at the very top, because there's a thing that has always existed in drumming, but definitely like the last 10 years, like the YouTube era has definitely like shined more of a light on chops.
Yes.
Which I, it's amazing. I understand like the technical proficiency that you have to do it, and it's mind blowing, and I totally get it. But when you're going into a situation like that, that is like going to apply for a job, with any corporation. You want to know what it is that job requires, and that's what you want to present yourself as. So, even though you might be able to do every job, in the building, if you're applying for a specific job of accounting, then that's kind of the resume you want to present, is how well do you do accounting. You don't want to come in and try to show them that you can do everything else too. So, that's number one. I would focus on playing the music and really getting detailed with playing the music, and not what I call playing at the music, which is what I hear a lot of people do. So it's like they kind of play at it. Like you're playing at the right tempo. You're kind of playing the right feel, kind of, but not really like detailed parts. Like, so I would dig into it, understand what it is that job requires, and then come in and play that music. Number two, I would say, don't talk too much. That's a really broad stroke, but when I say don't talk too much, meaning in a situation where you're auditioning for something like that, people are evaluating more than just your talent level, because you're also kind of you're talking about hiring somebody that you're going to be basically living with for however long you're going to be on tour or whatever. So, like, be yourself, but at the same time, like, understand that there's a level of giving that you should do, like, as far as personality goes. Like, let your personality kind of be give and take, and not come in and take over a room, or come in and everything is kind of centered around you. Like, get to know people, be personable, but don't really, like, don't go so far where people just don't want you to be there.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Some people don't know when they do that, but it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah, dude, self-awareness is, I think, one of the most important things for musicians to understand in every aspect. Because if you're not self-aware as with your personality, you're likely not self-aware musically, like where you're fitting in. It all comes back to listening, right?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
The other thing you said that I thought was a great parallel was the accounting concept, right? Relating that to music. And I think something that we see too is we see things like, if you're a fighter, it's kind of like what Bruce Lee said, where he's like, I don't fear the man that knows 10,000 kicks or practiced 10,000 kicks. I fear the man that's practiced one kick 10,000 times,
Yeah.
And I think that's true for musicality. Is it's like if you go into an audition and you play bare bones, you just play the parts, but it feels amazing, you're going to beat out every other dude that comes in there and can spray chops all over songs, because that's going to piss artists off.
Yeah.
So that's great, dude. Couple of the questions for you real quick, man. Zach Smith also asked, what's the first and last thing you do each day? I thought that was a really cool question.
Okay, yeah. One of the things that we do as a family, which doesn't always happen verbally, sometimes it's just kind of to ourselves, but we made it a point, like with our kids, we've been raising them from the time they were young to just wake up in the morning and say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And, so that's kind of, we do it together a lot. If the baby comes climbing to bed, she'll be half asleep, but that's the first thing that we're going to say. And there's a lot of times where it just happens. I wake up, and that's the first thing on my mind. That's the first thing that I attempt to do. I fail sometimes, and I probably get on Instagram first. But that's definitely that's the first thing that is on my mind. And then after that, man, I like to get up and get moving. So like I use the resistance bands, and I'll get up and just get my body moving, you know.
Yeah, dude,
And
that's
then we're
great,
off.
man. That's great. Joshua Net.
And then the last thing.
Yeah.
The last thing is normally shutting down my computer because I'm normally down in my studio like really late after everybody's gone to bed. That's when I'm most productive. So like once I feel my eyelids getting heavy, the last thing I normally do is close the computer and I'm like gone straight to bed, you know. But it's like 3 in the morning most of the time.
That's an amazing quality, man, because a lot of people, like even myself sometimes, find it real hard to shut off, you know?
Yeah. I definitely am one of those people, but my body finds a way to let me know like it's over.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Cool, man. This is the last question that I'll ask is Joshua Napier. Hopefully I got that right, Josh. Love you, dude. He asked, and this is the perfect question for you, Nate, is on the business side of music, what is something that is vital for every musician to understand?
I would say it is vital to understand that it is a business.
Yeah.
And I think I see a lot of people who just don't approach it that way. Like they just kind of approach the art. So I would say understand that you are an entity inside of a larger industry, and that's how you should like try to go about your business. And you know, think beyond. Think beyond music. Think beyond just the drums. You know, and think about ways that you can make this sustainable. You know, beyond your playing career. You know, or beyond like when things might be really cooking for you, and as far as sitting behind the drums playing and being able to make a living. So like think beyond that and understand that it's a business, and it's 95% business, and like 5%, the last 5% of the way is the creative time that you get to spend like actually playing and enjoying the things that you know, the music that you love. But the other 95% of the time, you should be thinking about ways to like really diversify yourself to survive in music, because it's not easy, you know. It's not easy, but the way to do it is to treat music as your product, the same way you would any other tangible product. Like if you were selling shoes, or if you were selling, you know, hats or anything, like you're gonna have to develop strategy and try to stay current, create new designs. Like you have to do all those things. So you got to do the same things in order to make it in music. So yeah, that's definitely what I would share. That's what I do share with a lot of my friends. Is like, man, come on, bro. Like you're an amazing drummer, or you're an amazing musician or amazing producer, but you need to create some infrastructure for that too, you know.
Man, you nailed that one, dude. And I love that I wouldn't even say it was oversimplified. I'd say it's actually exactly what needs to be said, is that you'd start by telling them that it is in fact a business. And the other question that the same guy, Josh, here asked was, like, do you have to be world class at playing before you can actually get into the music industry? And I ignored that question because I think it was just answered by what you're saying, is that at the end of the day, if you wait for your product to be world class, you've waited too long.
Yeah.
I love what the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, had to say. He said, if you wait until your product is perfect, or actually, I think I'm butchering the quote now, but essentially he says, like, if you wait to refine your product, you've already waited too long. Like, if you're not, this is the quote here. He says, if you're not embarrassed by the first thing you ship, if you're not embarrassed, you've waited too long. So that's it, man. It's like you just got to get out there and just start. And I think what you'll find is, like, you know, the world class thing only happens after you've had a career in the music industry for a while. You know, You can't wait for that to come to you first, man. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. And to answer his question a little bit more, like, man, I know guys now who I would consider world class, you know, when you add in all factors, but they're not like the greatest players in the world, but they are they're good business people. They understand the business. They play it well, and as far as their playing goes, they get their job done. You know, so they might not be able to hop on my gig and do what I do, but I probably can't hop on their gig and do what they do. You know, like they get their job done, and they provide the field for whatever it is that they do. But they are successful and they have longevity because they do the other 95% right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, that's amazing. Listen, you know what, dude? We're going to have to set aside some more time in the future to dive into, you know, Heard Not Seen, and just talk more about the different projects, the different things you're involved with. But right away, man, for anybody who wants to catch you online, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you, to see what you're up to, and to follow you online?
You can visit my website, which is thebeatbreaker.com. That can link you to all my social media stuff, or if you want to just go directly there, it's all 116BeatBreaker. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is Nate the Beatbreaker Robinson, but it's not too hard to find. I'm just the other guy. I'm not the basketball player, and then you'll find me.
Well, for everybody that's listening, if you guys head to 180drums.com/Nate R, we'll have everything linked up in the show notes, so you guys can head over there, check out everything Nate's up to. We're gonna have a bunch of clips of Nate playing for you guys to look at, and a little blurb on what we talked about today. Because, dude, I think this is some of the most valuable information we could possibly get chatting with another drummer, is the business perspective, the life perspective, the fact that it, you know, like, my favorite thing you said was you're an entity inside of a larger industry. That was just so well worded, man. So thanks so much for your time, bro. So great catching up, man.
Yeah, man. Next time, just let me know when.
Next time. You got it, dude.
All right, bro. See you.
See you, man.
That's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed Nate's insight just as much as I did. Go find your weakness so you can eliminate it. If you want to go check out more about Nate, head over to the show notes and check them out at 180drums.com/Nate R. And we'll have more information about him up there. You can also check him out online at thebeatbreaker.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please go rate us on iTunes so that other drummers can enjoy this podcast. That's it for this week, guys. Stay tuned. Next week, we're going to have another killer podcast coming your way from 180 Drums. See ya.